out of the but I can definitely see where on a second instrument, you know, like, because you have this concept of music, and again, because you've been sort of absorbing all this stuff from players that we have on records and that, you know, we know personally. I mean, I could definitely see where it was just a matter of like, okay, let me figure out how to play this like thing with a reed, you know, and then like I can apply a lot of the same, you know, musical concepts at least, or different ones. Do you approach, like, is your style of playing, like, because you're a very competent, to say the least, improviser. How do you approach playing on each one? I imagine that you probably have like the same ideas, but I'm sure that you get very different things coming out just because of the character of each instrument or the situation, you know, that would lend itself.
Well, I did a lot of thinking about this because one thing about playing these two instruments was that I did not want it to be a novelty.
Right.
Of course, if I'm going to play any instrument, I don't want it to be a novelty. I want to be actually, I want to get in there. I want to really play. But then picking up saxophone, it's like, okay, everyone always says, but at the time I was hearing a lot of people say that saxophone's easy. You know, you just press a bunch of buttons and you got it. So I was just, you know, and initially at first coming from trumpet, things were a lot different. And so it was just kind of like, whoa, this is kind of crazy. But with that, I was like, you know, I want to make sure I really get in here as well, because there's a lot of the recordings that drew me to this instrument are from tenor players, drew me to music in general, especially instrumental music, and jazz is from tenor players and piano players. And so it's just a lot of, between those two instruments, it's a lot of harmonic stuff you got to know. There's a lot of, like, you know, with saxophone, there's a lot of stuff with saxophone. You probably, I don't want to say you can't do it on trumpet, but you probably would not gravitate towards that. You would gravitate toward other things because just the facility of it and just the speed of certain things is just kind of that's not a thing you would really say on that instrument. And so realizing that the saxophone was not just an instrument where you just press a bunch of buttons and notes come out, realizing that it's actually an ocean of an instrument in itself, which has very large portions of the other abilities that the other instruments have in it, as a horn, which is pretty amazing. And realizing that I was going to have, you know, decades of work just to understand past work of masters, you know, I was just kind of like, I want to make sure that I really get in here as well. So for me, the first step was I had a teacher in school. I can't remember. It was either middle school or high school. And I can't remember his name, but he, I think it was this guy named Nick Panos. He was an amazing trumpet player. He was a lead player, but he had like a really fat sound, and he had kind of a very character-filled sound, and I always loved it. He looked at me and he said, whenever you're practicing something, you want to make sure, you want to think about the thing that you know the most. It was like, you know, you take your C major scale. We all know C major. That's the one we learned 6th grade. We want to make everything else that we're practicing eventually become as easy as C major. That's what we're practicing for, so we can manipulate it.
Right.
And so taking that approach, I was like, well, when I'm with the saxophone, I want to make the saxophone I want to feel as much in control on saxophone as I do on the trumpet. So then I started using a lot of trumpet exercises that I had gotten really comfortable with. And I used those on saxophone. And then vice versa, took saxophone exercises over the trumpet. So then eventually saxophone started changing the way my trumpet playing was sounded because I was playing different exercises on it. But I knew where the exercises were coming from because I was also learning that instrument at the same time. So it became this, it's kind of more like a Venom suit in a way. Like they like, it went from, I don't want it to sound like I'm playing this instrument. I want it to be like, oh, this is playing. So I don't want to play the trumpet ideas on saxophone and vice versa. I want to make sure I sound like a trumpet player and sound like a saxophone player. It went from that to now they both work in tandem to create this thing that's based on how I feel at the moment. Mm-hmm. So that's how I essentially get around dealing with, instead of trying to keep them separate, they work together now.
Sure, yeah.
To kind of inform each other, and kind of it's great because it I feel like for me it like allows me to kind of create my own sound in a certain way. So I really enjoy playing both, though, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, not to mention, so you have the Marcus Tenney Quartet, you have the Marcus Tenney Trio. You got to remind me, is there one that you do on trumpet versus like on saxophone, or you sort of whatever it is that you're feeling, you know, for a particular gig? Like I could imagine that playing a trumpet trio gig would be no small task.
It's interesting for the quartet stuff. I do try to make that more trumpet. I actually have two versions of that I'm in the process of writing music for. There's the more straight ahead, more intimate side, which is the quartet, and then there's the funk edition, which is more funk oriented stuff that I made. A lot of that music came from music that I made on my computer, so I like fleshed that out for a trumpet quartet, and so it'll be more of a more less traditional, more experimental stuff.
Right.
And then the trio, there's also two iterations of that. There's the trio with Devon and Andy, and then also we have the +4 stuff that we've been working on in Richmond, which is that same group with the brass quartet, 2 trumpets, 2 trombones.
Wow.
And Andy and I wrote some arrangements of some of our original tunes as well as some favorite tunes from other artists for that group. And we played at the Hoff. We're trying to set up a couple more shows before we go back to the studio. We recorded a while ago, but we haven't gotten the sound yet. So we're still working on it.
Tell me about the Tennessee stuff, man. Yeah.
That I actually got to send you that album. The Triple Trey, the latest self-produced album is done. I just have to figure out what to do with it now. But I'm going to send it to you after this. Hope you check it out and see what you think.
Yeah, please.
But got that album. Andy's actually, we've been doing the shows with Charles Owens for Randazzo's Big Band.
Mm-hmm.
So we did the Southern this past Tuesday. And this upcoming Tuesday, we're going to do the same show again, except it's going to be recorded video and audio, I believe.
Oh, man. That's amazing.
And so, yeah, it's amazing because Charles sounds incredible. And so does the whole band. Everything about it is incredible. But with that, Andy also took the single from Triple Trey and wrote a big band arrangement of that tune. And so we're kind of trying to figure out a way to combine our collective powers in order to put this hip-hop album out. So there may be some kind of large mass collision of big bands and hip-hops and other things coming soon. We're still working that out, but I think after seeing Charles and having Andy do an arrangement of one of those songs, interesting to see the ideas that come from that. But yeah, that show is very inspirational. Charles sounds amazing.
Yeah, no, he really does. Every time after I play with him or I just hear him play, I'm like, okay, I need to go practice like right now.
Yeah, he just has such command over the instrument, and he has
exactly the word I was going for. The command, man,
consistent, and he's very consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Very consistent, and he's also very knowledgeable about records as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So that's always good. Just because you can kind of point not only musicians but just music appreciators in the right direction.
Yeah. No, I mean, y'all make me really miss living down there, man. I wish I could be more of a part. There's a lot of cross-pollination between Charlottesville and Richmond. And not really as much between those two places in D.C. I guess that extra hour on the highway is really preventative for a lot of folks.
We got to find a way to open it up because I would love to get up there.
Oh, I know, man. And in fact, I got to talk to you about I've got a couple of things I want to talk to you about, a couple of dates. But yeah, man, sometimes I'm just like, man, Marcus Tenney's so busy. I don't even know if I could get him in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of planning going on right now, but I would much rather be playing, of course. So I try to get that in wherever I can. So.
No, it's funny. I just talked to, I just sort of threw it out to Andy a little while ago, man. I'm hoping that at some point will be able to do a collaboration, with his big band and with the front line. I just got to write some more tunes before we do it.
That would be, because I think he's also, that would be great. That big band is so much fun. Andy put a lot of time and energy into those charts, and so it just sounds incredible. And he's been working on it for a while. And it would also be good to combine projects that have written music.
Yeah,
it's good to see projects without written music. Because that's also the majority of stuff we see. But it's also good to see people reading.
Well, it's one thing that I'm actually kind of trying to get away from is like so much of the reading stuff. I mean, it's cool, I guess, in that I just want folks to be, the whole point, right, is that like you want folks to be able to be comfortable enough so that like they're not reading anymore. Sometimes that's as you mentioned, like you're still trying to sculpt the sound that you're going for, with that project, with Andy and the funk stuff. I mean, and it's very much a way in that at first, I had no other way to convey like what I had in mind other than like writing the stuff down, but the exciting part, especially when you put a chart in the hands of a talented musician such as yourself or like Charles or any of the other folks that I get to call, is that like then they put their spin on it, and now we're really making music, unique sort of take to it, and so that you can get to all the stuff that's not really on the pages.
Yeah,
I wish I could get down to Richmond more often, but there's so many drummers down there. There's no reason for me to go. There's no reason for someone to call me. There's so many drummers down there, man.
Richmond has changed so dramatically. It's crazy. Gee. I feel like every time I step out my front door, Richmond has changed in some way. I'm always seeing some new restaurant or, some new area, new brewery that's having live music, or like, the Camel's doing upgrades, such and such is playing here. The jazz scene here has kind of opened up in a way that is very good, but I feel like it's also, there's been so many musicians waiting to play that it has not, there's still not a lot of room,
Right.
Especially now that jazz has also become more in the forefront in terms of music. It's also now it's having to compete with all of these other things that previously necessarily wasn't having to compete with, especially jazz in Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting, there's these growing pains that are happening.
Sure.
But it's cool. It's good to see it's growing. Growing is always good.
Yeah, for sure. And at least from afar, man, I mean, I tell y'all, if there's one person who is consistently involved in all these amazing projects, going on around Richmond, from the ones that we mentioned, like Butcher Brown, No BS, and Marcus's bands, to like Sam Reed, to Kings, to the stuff that Devon gets going. I mean, I know I'm leaving some things out, but I mean, it seems like there are certain folks, such as yourself, that are like always involved with these amazing projects. And it's just amazing to see just that sense of community that y'all have down there, that y'all really support each other, especially when we know, that the money might not always be what we want, right? Like the attendance might not always be what we want, but just the fact that y'all seem, at least from my perspective up here, up the highway a little bit, that y'all are just really supportive of each other in the projects, and that it's really about the music. It's not about, I don't know about this. It's, kind of whack or whatever, it's just really genuine support, which I think is it's just so important to have, especially when you're a new artist and you're trying to make something happen. And there are so many roadblocks and growing pains in your way, that any type of support that you have from, musicians that you're working with or within the community, with the venues that you get to work with, that's just, really important, and something that, at least from what I've seen, Richmond seems to be doing a lot better than a lot of other places.
Richmond has, especially the Richmond musical community, as a whole, that community, I feel like, was built on community. It was built on the fact that we're all here doing this thing. And then it became an environment where collective action was promoted. Mm-hmm. So it was like, we have this person, like, the way I met Lance was that was where everyone would go to record. And so the professors in the jazz department would tell people, if you had an audition tape, just get a few bucks together and go over to Lance's and record it, So having those types of things in place in different areas of the industry in Richmond kind of, I feel like, is what is responsible for that community vibe that is very much in the forefront right now. It's because, you know, those people, all of